It's good to see everybody here. It's my distinct pleasure and privilege to have what I hope will be a musically enchanting and historically illuminating conversation with Vidya. We've had a few moments to get to know each other and to think about how we can energize and start this festival off on the right note. I can't think of a better way than to invite Vidya on Ganesha Chaturthi to perhaps sing for us and to start us off with a blessing and a number.
Good morning. That's what I call an occupational hazard. Well, Sanjoy did mention it is Ganesh Chaturthi today, and I think I will begin with a I'm not sure why it's not coming on, but I'm not sure what's going on. So. Well, Ganesha is supposed to be the one who helps you overcome obstacles. So at some point this will start coming on. But till it does, I think I'll manage without the Tanpura. Those of you who wish to join me in this, this prayer, which is very popular, we all, a lot of us know it and are familiar with the idea of reaching out to the God who, of course, not only removes obstacles, but is also the bestower of wisdom. Vakratunda Mahakaya, that's the one that I thought I would begin with. Vakratunda, the one who has a trunk which is like this. Mahakaya, the big-bodied one. Surya Koti, one who has the glow of 1,000 suns. Surya Koti Samaprabha. Nirvignam Kurume Deva. Please make this life of mine one without obstacles. Nirvignam Kurume Deva. Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. In every effort that I put into this life. So, Vakratunda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Vakratunda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada.
That was wonderful and beautiful. Thank you so much. As Suraj had indicated in the introduction, you are a multidisciplinary trained artist and singer. You started off your training at the age of 12, I believe, in Carnatic music. But you've also trained with some of the most illustrious teachers in Khayal, Thumri, Ghazal, and and also who have done research and into the music of Western Madhya Pradesh and have engaged yourself with folk genres as well. This is not an easy disciplinary space to inhabit, where you have these contending musical traditions. You know, that it's all considered classical Indian arts today, but they have histories that predate the Republic of India, and they have very distinct musical philosophies and systems. So I wonder what it is like for a creator, a singer, an artist like yourself to be immersed and in conversation with so many different disciplinary musical traditions. What does that feel like, and how does that impact you?
Wow. That's the thing when you have an academic in conversation with you. You have to like sort of unpack the question, you know, first. Well, I think I've just been very privileged. I've been very lucky, and I've also been a little greedy. The fact that I grew up with exposure to different kinds of music, but I belong to a South Indian family. My family comes from Tamil Nadu in the south of India. So in the south, it's quite typical to be thrown into some kind of, you know, creative art form. You're either learning to sing or to play some instrument or to dance. So I was also made to learn, and I'm carefully using the word made to learn because it's very often at that age it seems like coercion and you want to run away from it. So from a very young age, you know, I had a master coming home and teaching me Carnatic music. So if one were to look at what we call vidhivat, something that is done traditionally, then that is my entry into the world of traditional music. But because I grew up with different kinds of music being played at home, so whether it was you know, Carnatic music, M.S. Subbalakshmi, or it was Pandit Bhimsen Joshi, or whether it was Begum Akhtar, or it was Mehdi Hasan Saab, or it was the Beatles sometimes, and so on and so forth. So I think it's very, very, I think being exposed to different sounds is a beautiful thing to happen. And it takes form and it goes through its own processes. And sometimes you end up having a person like me who's dabbled in, you know, in various things, yes. But I think after having trained in Carnatic music for several years, I was particularly drawn to Hindustani classical music, Shastriya Sangeet, because it offers something quite exceptional, quite fantastic. So the kind of traditional music that is quite celebrated as classical music in North India particularly is called Khayal Gaiki. So the word itself, Khayal, means thought or an imagination, and it allows you to engage with your music and create something in the realm of abstraction. And I think that really is such a spectacular thing to be able to do. You know, you're given a set of notes, you're taught something, but then you have your canvas and you fill the colors with it the way you like. So that really drew me to this music form. And from there, I sort of also was lucky to find gurus who took me into other journeys.
Do you ever face any kind of tensions between these different forms, like the folk and the Khayal and the Thumri and the Carnatic? Does that ever come up for you as something that needs to be negotiated?
See, as a performer, my practice is quite, you know, in the semi-classical realm. But I think all this music is kind of interconnected, and I deeply feel that music is very, very connected to our societies. It's very stitched into the social fabric, and so there is a connection that you see. So, for example, you call something folk, but that folk has transitioned or even transgressed into what we perform as semi-classical music. So let me illustrate. So this song is actually, it's quite a silly song. And as is very often the case in, you know, in the sense of thematically, it's like every day sweeping the floor, waiting for your lover, you know, being irritated by your mother-in-law. Those are the kind of themes that I think we all at some level relate to. And they also come into the whole folk. I mean, the idea of folk is that people should be able to sing it, right? So at some point, it also comes into the semi-classical world of Indian music. So what we call Thumri, Dadra is very much thematically, it borrows from the folk. So there is a very popular, okay, I'm going to try this once more, and if it doesn't work, then so be it. I don't know what the problem is. Anyway. So, if you can just help me with whatever you have. So this song is really about how this woman is sweeping her courtyard, and she's actually, this gives her an opportunity to get out of the confines of the four walls of her house. She's sweeping there, and she keeps looking up to see whether her brother-in-law is returning from somewhere so that she can flirt with him. So this is actually a folk song, but it became very popular by this is crazy. I got it. This side is volume? निहुरे निहुरे बुहारे अंगनवा गोरिया निहुरे 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 बहारे अंगनवा गोरिया निहुरे हाँ निहुरे 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 बहारे अंगनवा गोरिया निहुरे छोटे देवर मोरी मुश्के बंधइयो हाँ मुश्के बंधइयो जब घर आए सजनवा गोरिया निहुरे जब घर आए सजनवा गोरिया निहुरे. So this is actually, so the language is completely a folk dialect from Eastern India, but it has been co-opted into the classical idiom. So what I'm trying to say is that music is not static. It has a lot of mobility. It keeps moving around genres. It keeps moving around language, you know. So I think I was happy to be able to navigate with all these ideas, yeah.
I mean, it brings me to the project that we want to spend some time discussing. Exactly what you have described seems to characterize many of the women artists who made those kinds of transitions, multiple transitions into the gramophone world, into the popular music realm, you know, something that did not exist before, but came about through the advent of the technology of you know, the 78 RPMs and things of that nature. And it was these women who were trained in these different kinds of classical traditions who made that leap to the popular. And it is, for those of you who don't already know, this is a gorgeous book. It is the book that Vidya has spent researching and writing. And it's a documentation of, I think, over 500 women artists, a little known fact, but both the popular musical industry of contemporary India, South Asia, as well as its film industry. Many people don't know that the initial directors and studio owners of what we know today as Bollywood were run and started by women, and it was over 500 women artists who were some of the earliest artists and were the earliest artists who recorded these different musical traditions into the gramophone and initiated a whole different oral culture and entertainment culture for us. So the book is available on Amazon, but tell us about these women that you have spent time, getting to know, and how they made that incredible leap into a new era, a new epoch with this technology that has now come to define India's visibility in the cultural sense, across the globe.
I'm going to preface the answer to your question with a little story about how I actually walked into this world. So in India, basically live classical music is about how you interact with your audience, and you draw a lot of sustenance, energy, excitement from that reaction. And in one of my concerts in New Delhi, where I live, I thought I had done a good job, and people were sort of, I got a decent ovation. And I was feeling good until one elderly gentleman walked up to me, and he said, he handed me 2 cassettes, actually. This was after cassettes had become obsolete. He gave me 2 cassettes, and he said, and I'm going to first say it in Hindi. He said, "Ye hota hai asli gana." Which is to say, this is actually real music. So it was the manner in which he sort of gave me these cassettes was like he completely dismissed what I had done, for 2 hours before that. And I was, of course, deeply hurt with this kind of insensitive response to some good singing, which I thought I had done. So I took the cassettes home, and I just, I put them away somewhere until one spring cleaning day, I suddenly found these, and I had to sort of pick it up. And there, the first thing that I noticed is that there are really, really like so many names mentioned on the, on the inlay of this cassette. And painstakingly handwritten. So I start trying to read these names, and on one side are the names, and on the other side are the songs that they have sung. Don't know any of the names, but know all of the songs. So I was a bit taken aback as to, all this that we sit and we learn at home from our gurus in what we really respect and celebrate and put on a pedestal as the Guru Shishya Parampara. Suddenly I see there are all these wonderful, names, and they've sung this. So I actually played the cassette. I do have these things at home because I keep, trying to transfer things, so on and so forth. So I played the cassette. Very difficult sound quality, but I could hear the bandishes that I had learned from my guru. And so it really got me into this curiosity as to who was Zohrabai Agrewali, who was Umda Jan, who was Hingan Bai, who was Babul Kot Farida Jan. And in several cases, the name had a place attached to it. So this is really what set me off in actually putting these women on record. The idea of the title is, it's about the women who sang on the gramophone record, but it is to acknowledge the fact that there is no record of who these women were. And if as a student of music, I didn't know who these people were, it seemed very likely that the world outside practically didn't know who they were. So for me, it was just a thing of anger, curiosity, all of that which led into this journey. And thus, I discovered that in the early 20th century, India actually became a very important market for recorded music. The first commercial recording happened in the year 1902, and that is a name I think that we are all familiar with. It was that of Gohar Jan. Now,
also known as Angelina Yearwood.
Yeah.
People do not know that she is of Armenian descent, Armenian Jewish descent, who's on one side, and the
Actually,
other side.
it's a very curious story because she was, of course, born to Armenian Jewish parentage. At some point, the father leaves the mother and goes away, and the mother converts to Islam and decides to become a performer, and decides to train Gohar in music and dancing because she feels a Tawaif's life will pull them out of that kind of penury. So that was a time when being a courtesan, when being a Tawaif, was something that people considered with respect, with a definite possibility of talent, of credibility, And so Gohar Jan not only learned to sing, but she also learned Kathak from we all know the name of the legendary Pandit Birju Maharaj. She learnt from his grandfather, right? So this was her lineage. And that's where this, this journey begins, you know, this whole making of the market begins.
What's your favorite song from her?
Many actually, but what I was really particularly excited by was that, you know, in the 78 RPMs, it was very common for women to announce their names at the end of the recording. They would do it themselves or they would have the recording engineer do it. So Gauhar Jan had the most creative way of doing it. So there was, my name is Gauhar Jan, 55 Morris Lane, Kolkata. There was one which says, my name is Gauhar Jan, I am champion. So that is really what, but one of the beautiful dadras that she has sung in the first recording is sung by several legends still today, which... I
was going to say, can we ask this legend to give us a rendition?
Now I'm going to have to ask Saskia to reveal her code in front of this whole audience. This has been quite a drama. You know, I find this so ironical that I'm talking about music and technology and I'm completely challenged on stage with... Yeah. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So this is Dadra that she sings on the first recording, which is आन बान जिया में लागी आन बान जिया में लागी जिया में बसी कैसे फंसी आन बान जिया में लागी आन बान Thank you.
What else needs to be said? But I have to bring up another important figure, of course, in music and in your book and work, which is Begum Akhtar. One of my favorites, and not only mine, because you know many poets and writers have been inspired. Agha Shahid Ali, the famous Kashmiri American poet, was absolutely smitten and very devastated when she died. And you know, one of the things that you have said in your work, and I think this is true, is that these women, the Gramophone Women, and the way they established the democratization of Indian classical arts, and they also then went on to inspire creative people in many other mediums, including literature and poetry. I just want to read, you know, the first stanza from Agha Shahid Ali's poem in memory of Begum Akhtar to give you a sense of the impact and the weight that these women had on crossing their influence into different areas of life and art. Your death in every paper, boxed in the black and white of photographs, obituaries, the sky warm, blue, ordinary, no hint of calamity, no room for sobs, even between the lines. I wish to talk of the end of the world. Begum Akhtar's death registers for Agha Shahid Ali as the end of the world. This is how she impacted the Indian South Asian imagination. Tell us about this.
I think if there was a rock star of the Ghazal, it was Begum Akhtar. She, you know, she started becoming popular in the 30s, and there's a really sweet little story about, you know, when she started singing on the record. She also started getting offers to do small roles in films. The talkies were already happening in the 30s, so in a couple of the earlier films, she acted as a vamp. She was actually holding a cigarette and wearing a black dress and all that. So the mother was very concerned about what is happening to the daughter and took her to, you know, a peer, a guru, and told him that I'm really worried that I'm losing my daughter to this this strange world of films. You have to do something about it. So he says, okay, pull out your, what we call the bayas, where you keep all your notes and your songs. And he opens the bayas and he puts his finger on the ghazal and he says, in your next recording, you sing this ghazal. And that ghazal of Begum Akhtar's defined her singing as a ghazal artist. So to this date, I think a lot of artists are looking for that Peer Baba to find us the right song to sing so that we can also have our successive hits. The ghazal was quite... the poet was Behzad Lakhnavi, Lucknow, from Lucknow in India. And she had a very nasal tone in those years. And she was called Akhtari Bai Faizabad. And it's important to remember and recollect that before she became Begum Akhtar, she was a Bai. And that's what we are trying to say here on Women on Record, that many women who were Bais had their own struggles before they became a Begum or became a Devi, and so on and so forth, yeah? She sang this ghazal which goes like this. दीवाना बनाना है तो दीवाना बना दे ये दीवाना बनाना है तो दीवाना बना दे वरना कहीं तकदीर तमाशान बना दे ये वरना कहीं तकदीर तमाशान बना दे दीवाना बनाना है तो दीवाना बना दे. Thank you. But I have to say, it wasn't all this beautiful music with classic Urdu lyrics. Even then, it was about the market. It was what was selling. And there were some songs which tried to make the record popular. So, for example, there would be English words in a song. So it could go like, please pardon, this is not a part of my classical training at all. My gurus will be terribly angry with me for singing this, but just to illustrate the point. Darling, tum ban gaye gentleman. So there were also songs like this. There were songs which spoke about the railways. There were songs which spoke about cigarettes. So, and there were jokes on the record. Initially a lot of, I have to make this point, Mohan. Initially, a lot of men would record jokes. They would record animal sounds. All of this was like, it was sort of catering to a curiosity about this new machine that had come into the lives of people. And something that you said was particularly relevant. It was about democratizing the listening experience. This was music that belonged to only a certain kind of people. There were only a certain kind of people who could listen to it, who could invite artists into their salons and, have them perform. But suddenly the machine made it possible for all kinds of people to be able to listen to this music. So you may ask, why women on record and why not men on record? Well, the men were silly enough not to understand how clever this business enterprise was. Really, but jokes apart, I think one of the main reasons why men were hesitant to record on the 78s in the beginning was because they did not want to sell that kind of traditional music which was handed down through the Guru Shishya Parampara. It was beneath them to sell this music. Secondly, they were also very, very of technology. Initially, women had to put their head into the wax horn and then record the song. There was no audience in front. They had to imagine the audience. So too, they were not particularly, comfortable with the idea of doing this. In fact, some of them said, "Mui meri awaaz kha jayegi ye to." That is to say, this is going to swallow my voice, this machine. So that kind of feeling suspicious, not sure, selling, reasons like that. But women who came from these Tawaif backgrounds, who were actually entrepreneurs, who felt ready to try something new, took to this technology literally like fish to water. And in the initial years, you have to remember that this was the Gramophone and Typewriter Company Limited, which came to India first. You know, we had the British then in our country. And there was a recording engineer by the name of William Gersberg who was sent to India and said, okay, set up a market there. So the poor man comes, he doesn't even know where to start. So somebody tells him, there are all these women who sing in these various salons, why don't you go and check them out? So in his memoir, Gersberg says that I heard these two little things. Shashi Mukhi and Funny Bala were their names, aged 14 and 16, with terribly screechy voices, and wore strange petticoats and was swirling around the room. It was so unbearable that I almost forgot all my training in piano. So that's where this enterprise starts in 1899, and by the time we are into the second decade of the 20th century, by 1912, we have 10 companies which have come into India, and we also have our own manufacturing plant. The first one was set up in Kolkata, Maharaja and Sons. And at that point, you know, a lot of trivia also started appearing. So the record was called Chudi Ka Baja. Chudi means the bangle. So Chudi Ka Baja, that which plays, the machine was called Chudi Ka Baja, that which plays this thing, contraption which looks like a bangle. Then there were riddles, there was songs. So there was all kinds of social trivia that was beginning to emerge around this market. I'm going to ask you a riddle, but it's in Hindi. I'm sure several of you will understand it. रोटी एक लगाती चक्कर, उस पर रखा भाला. रोटी एक लगाती चक्कर, उस पर रखा भाला. झूम झूम डायन सुर में गाती. रोटी का है मुंह काला, बताइए क्या? Amazing. Anyway, so there was also this kind of fun that was happening. And speaking of coming back to Begum Akhtar, she recorded a few songs which she later would say, "Kisi ko sunana mat ye sab." And actually, if you listen to those songs, they are quite innocent, and they would pale in comparison to what in India is now this huge thing called item number. So somewhat in the risque category, but not quite there. So one such song was, I think, every woman's dream. It was about having a slim waist and long hair.
So that's a really important point. Please sing the line. Please sing
I'm just not letting Mohan speak because I'm very worried about...
No, you sing.
No, just one line of Patli Kamar. Oh my God, please not to be mentioned outside of this room. पतली कमर लंबे बाल, अरे हाँ लंबे बाल, चलूं जैसे कामनिया. पतली कमर लंबे बाल, अरे हाँ लंबे बाल, चलूं जैसे कामनिया. पतली कमर लंबे बाल, जाई कहाँ मोरे बारे बलम से, जाई कहाँ मोरे बारे बलम से, विदा कर दीनी गवन नहीं लीनी, चलूं जैसे कामनिया. पतली कमर लंबे बाल. Thank you.
I think the travesty of this story, in a sense, is that these women who are producing what is modern popular culture in India were subjected to, you know, these regimes of patriarchal control and suppression, where they had to go from wives. And, you know, we all know the story, we should know the story of the persecution of the wives that began in the British colonial era, how they got mischaracterized as prostitutes, and Victorian norms were imposed, you know, to sort of criminalize, this form of leisure and artistry, and then not only to be put on the feet of the colonizer, but also after independence, All India Radio would not allow these women to sing. You had to be married in order to sing, because you were seen to be a loose woman, and you had to become a begum before you were allowed to sing on All India Radio. So, I mean, we go to the heart of the contradiction of the feminine, the creative, and the divine in India. On the one hand, we worship, our feminine divine, and we pay homage to these women who created the musical forms of entertainment and leisure that we all enjoy today. And yet we know what happens in India with violence, and the recent cases, are not in isolation, but something that happens regularly. And we see how these women, in the history that you have unraveled in the book, had to struggle, despite the fact they were making these incredible contributions, and they had to become contained and coded into particular kinds of roles. It could not be single women who were entrepreneurial and succeeding in a technology, because the privileged male, teachers were afraid to get into it, because they also had privilege in that section. I know that, male teachers would not teach the entire composition to some of the female students, only half a bandish, for example, right? But these women took the leap. They went into this new technology. They established an entire industry, but then they get contained. They got, brought back into a respectable culture, and, through the vehicle of marriage and government policy, they are sidelined and marginalized again. I mean, what do you make of these contradictions in the story that you have uncovered?
Perhaps it's some of these political challenges around the time that this phenomenon was gaining so much of currency and presence that led to the sidelining of these women, So there were two things that were happening. One, which had already begun in the 19th century, mid-19th onwards, which came out of the whole Victorian morality and their perception of what is entertainment in India. And the fact that they had already adequately stigmatized this community of the wives. And it is, I'm sure some of you here know, it is from that very perception and that very stigmatization that there was the anti-notch movement that gets set off, right? So there is already a movement that is being put in place to ensure that this is a considered community, that this is a community that doesn't deserve respect, that they, quote unquote, are debauched. And therefore, they need to move away from the mainstream understanding of Indian culture. Now, this understanding or this reductionist way of looking at this community is taken over by what happens in the nationalist movement. So the nationalist movement then carries forward this idea of these women, of putting them into a category, and uses that very logic, that very argument to say that this cannot be a representation of Indian culture. They cannot be the, flag bearers of this rich 5,000-year-old tradition that we have. And in the process, more men start performing on the record. More women who are not from this community also start recording. And one of the important reasons for that is actually two reasons. One, that the market took off. It was working well. But secondly, a lot of musicians and artists realized the worth of anonymity. The fact that if you sing on a record, you're not seen. You can record, people can listen to you, but they don't know who you are. So this idea that you don't have to be sitting and performing to a group of men, and yet, you can get recorded, is something that a lot of women started realizing and making use of that. Yeah? And there were men who decided to use the technology to record bhajans, the idea that you were talking about, sort of divinity, spiritual space, cleansing their notion of Indian culture, editing things out which do not fit into the, the clean image of what India should be, so on and so forth. So in the process, these women suffer, and like you rightly pointed out, and in our research we were given to understand that a lot of state institutions, government institutions, did not allow these women to perform or to record, particularly the All India Radio, because it was suggested that only married women can record. So some of them then took on titles of Devi and Begum randomly also, so that they could record. So I have to here though mention the fact that a lot of the wives were very closely involved with the nationalist movement as well. Jadan Bai, for example, Jadan Bai was Nargis's mother, actor Nargis's mother, and for the younger people here, Sanjay Dutt's grandmother. She contributed to the progressive writers movement. Kanan Devi, she set up a shelter for freedom fighters. Gauhar Jan promised money to the Congress. There's a really funny story where she says she'll sing at this Maidan in Kolkata because Gandhiji is coming there, and she says, whatever money that I get, I will give that money as donation to the Congress. Gandhiji doesn't come to this concert, and so she gets really angry because, she was a diva of that time. So she says that if he can't come, okay, then I'll only donate half the money. So, but anyway, the fact is that a lot of them were very involved in, there's a beautiful rendition of Vande Mataram by a legendary singer of that time, Mogubai Kurdikar, who was Vidushi Kishori Amonkar's mother. And it's really beautiful. You'll find it online, but it goes... Vande Mataram Sujalam Sufalam Malayaj Sheetalam Shashya Shamalam Mataram Jaya Vande Mataram. This is Mogubai's rendition of Vande Mataram. Shanta Apte, the other woman from Maharashtra, an upper caste woman, actually sings the entire national anthem, the 5 stanzas, 3 of which we don't sing in India today. So a lot of women become involved. They sing on Young India records. Then, they're talking about Siddheshwari Devi, the legendary Thumri singer from Banaras, would stand up at the end of a concert and sing Vande Mataram. Husna Bai, in the 1929 Congress, she composes a song for the freedom fighters. The other thing which is particularly interesting in this context is that the wives, because they would perform in various centers, had the mobility that a lot of other people didn't. So they would actually create small booklets of songs for people to sing, patriotic songs. So a lot was being done by the community, even though they were being sidelined and they were being pushed out of mainstream understanding of Indian music and Indian musicians.
We're almost at that time. I've been given a signal. Let me finish with this thought then. I mean, we see not only that women have been, at the forefront of music, politics, industry, very similar to Vidya here. You should also know that she's also an activist. Like the women that she has studied, she has worked with agricultural labor movements, women's movements. So this tradition of combining, artistry, musicality, social consciousness is something that runs deep. We, of course, have very different competing narratives about what is Indian identity today. Very essentialized notion that it's just this one particular religion, a majoritarian group contributing. Even in classical arts, there is an erasure in multiple senses. A lot of the Muslim women who we have talked about are not seen to represent the contributions that Muslim people have made to the co-creation of what used to be known as the beautiful composite culture of India. Does it still exist in the work of the Sufiana Kalams and the Bhakti traditions and in the histories that we have? Does that composite Indian culture still exist, you think?
संजय मुझे बेल करा देना बाद में. No, absolutely. I mean, if you look at how Indian music has evolved, at least over the last 4 centuries, the kind of music that we practice, it has existed in various forms, but you know, what we call classical music or Thumri, or at least we can trace it back to 4 centuries. The fact that it continues to exist, and there are many communities that continue to practice it through generations, is an indication of the resilience, of the strength that the music has. So I don't think we necessarily even need to unpack it into these conversations. I personally believe that, you know, I work with different communities of musicians, and very often we don't realize that. I mean, we don't work together because we are different communities. Huh? Exactly. That is really what it is. And I think we should let it be. We should really let it be, because I really feel that some things, you know, the more you sort of put it out there, the more it, you know, the more these conversations get visibility, the more we endanger the very premise of this beautiful fabric that I said that it is.
And on that note, and that wonderful note, we thank you for your attention, and thank you for the beautiful music.
Thank you very much for making it so engaging for me. Thank you, Mohan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
Stay tuned for the next iteration.
Ladies and gentlemen, Vidya Shah and Mohan Ambikaipaker for that wonderful, wonderful session. Let's hear it once again for them.